The game of football is evolving, and that means that the good coaches need to evolve with it. Offenses are getting better at spacing the field and forcing defenses to cover all 5,333 square yards of it. In order to combat that, defenses are getting faster, and usually that means they have to sacrifice some size. Nowhere is this transition more prevalent than in the defenses led by FSU's defensive coordinator, Adam Fuller. As I covered before, when the staff first stepped foot on campus, Fuller is a 4-2-5 guy. That means that he wants to have 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, and 5 players in the secondary. Basically, they play a traditional 4-3, but this third linebacker is substituted out for a 5th defensive back, otherwise known as a nickel. But in Memphis, that player really wasn't a true defensive back. He was more of a hybrid player, who was somewhere between a linebacker and a corner. Depending on the coach, these hybrid players usually get their really unique names on defense. FSU specifically calls them the stud. This hybrid player was a natural transition away from the 4-3 of olden days. It allows teams to keep their schemes the same while adjusting to modern spread offenses. Specifically, it keeps the run fits the same. In general, in a 4-3, the first 7 guys to fill gaps are the front 4 and the 3 linebackers behind them. This often meant that the strong side backer was in conflict. He had to both fill a gap, often the play side B gap, while also having to cover space. This player would often split the difference between the end of the line of scrimmage and the receiver, to the point where most offenses referred to him as the apex player. This conflict is where spread offenses, specifically RPO-based offenses, were able to thrive. This guy can't be in 2 places at once. He can't both fill his run gap while also covering in space. If you read him, you can make it so he's always wrong. But in Fuller's time at Memphis, they could get away with bigger linebackers in this role. Their starter in the stud position was 207-pound Thomas Pickens, but they also rotated 225-pound Austin Hall out there a fair amount. But they found that they couldn't have their cake and eat it too when they got to the ACC. In their first released depth chart at FSU, they listed Amari Gainer at 215 and 205-pound Kalen DeLoach as sharing the starting position. Both guys that would end up being interior linebackers down the road for the Knowles. It didn't take long for teams to try to take advantage of these quote-unquote hybrid defenders. This is literally the second defensive snap by a Fuller defense at FSU. They're playing some kind of cover 4 here, and Kalen DeLoach at the stud position is in conflict. It looks like he's responsible for disrupting the slant route and fitting the frontside B gap, judging by how hard he crashes towards the run. This creates a big throwing window for Tech and an easy first down. Here's another example of almost the exact same play. All it takes is a slight hesitation by Amari Gainer towards the run to allow Jacksonville State to complete a slant behind him. So I want you to take a second and think about how you would fix this issue. Because unless you have an elite athlete out there that can essentially be in 2 places at once, something has to give. Where their solution was to put a coverage corner, a true nickel, Kevin Knowles, who weighs in at 185 pounds, in that position and take him completely out of the run fit, which allows him to cover down on the receiver outside. In essence, they chose to take away the pass, the statistically more efficient play. But that leaves the defense 1 player short on run fits, and with what I'll refer to as a light box from here on out. That B gap is now completely unfilled, which leaves you with a new problem. How do you keep teams from gashing you in the run game? There's really 3 potential solutions to this problem. You can cheat a safety into the box, but that really just opens you up to RPOs on the other side of the field. The other options require you to close that B gap. You can either do this by cheating your defensive ends into the B gap, which is known as a tight front, which is becoming increasingly common in college football, or you do what's called jimmying your defensive end. That basically means he has to be able to engage and hold the tackle with his eyes slightly inside. This should make the running back bounce the run outside, where the secondary can rally and make the tackle. If the defensive ends can't win back inside, then the defense runs into some issues, which is one of the reasons FSU struggled stopping the run against some of the better teams that it faced. But that's a risk you run into when you operate out of a light box. To old school football fans, this might seem crazy. You're literally begging offenses to run the ball on you. But FSU isn't some good company with this strategy. Here's Alabama's passing game coordinator talking about this position in particular.
So we want to push it, so we're not going to ask that star, our nickel, to get involved in the box. All right, he's going to be a pass-first player. So in order to do that, we have to stunt the front. All right.
And here's some data that backs this up. This chart shows how often teams lined up in light boxes. FSU is in the same neighborhood with some of the best defenses in the country in Georgia, Iowa, Iowa State, and Michigan. And because of that adjustment, you can see in Fuller's 3 years here, they've lowered the opposing passer rating and yards per passing attempt on RPOs every season. But before we get carried away, I have to acknowledge that this chart doesn't tell the full story. This year's team actually gave up more total yards per play than last season on RPOs when you factor in the run. And a closer look tells you why. FSU could not stop runs against Wake Forest, Clemson, and Louisville, and those games stand out as clear outliers which dramatically skew those rushing numbers upwards. These teams coincidentally have the 3 best offenses FSU faced when their best defensive lineman, Fabian Lovett, was out with injury. So in my opinion, this is the takeaway here. If they can dominate the line of scrimmage with a light box, it gave them numbers on the outside and took away anything an offense might want to do. This explains why the defense could shut down mediocre offenses, but struggled against better teams. But if a team could run against their light box, they were probably going to be able to put up some points. Now, I believe that FSU is going to continue to play a light box, as evidenced by their huge investment into the defensive line in the portal last season. And if that line can dominate like it seems like they should, then FSU's defense could take another big step forward this season. Thanks for watching. I really want to dive into this concept further to see how it changes how FSU has to play coverages. And I'll probably be putting out videos like that as the offseason progresses. So make sure you like and subscribe to this channel and the Knowles 247 channel where I'm also producing content so you don't miss a thing. Thanks.